Very happy for the presentation today, and I hope everyone gets a little bit out of how to build classification hearing presentations and mining data from DLS. At first, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Chris Wilcock, the Bureau Chief of Local Assessment at DLS. Before I was at DLS, I was actually a assessor in 5 different communities, spanning almost 20 years. I counted up today, and unbelievable. It's been over 20 presentations I've put together over the years. Most of those presentations have relied on data and just different facts. And today I hope to show you how I grabbed all that data from DLS and how, with all the information from DARB, you can put together a very powerful, a very informative classification hearing worksheet or PowerPoint using all the data mined from DLS. So it's very important as far as mining data that you want to tell a story. Just simply putting data on a sheet is too much sometimes. So a combination of having data, having a narrative, and also telling a story about what's happened in the past, what's happening right now, and based on the options at that meeting, what could happen based on the tax policy that your community chooses. As far as DLS, I thought that I would start out with just an org structure of today. Just the simple functions. There's a lot of overlapping data. So what I'm going to do is just explain the org structure for any new assessors or any new municipal finance or elected officials. Next, we're going to talk about what's the purpose of a classification hearing. Then we're going to go into meeting stakeholders, whether it's residents, elected officials, or the business community. We'll get into how to mine DLS data. We'll go through 3 examples of presentations that have been used in cities and towns over the last 10 years. And we'll get into what building blocks you need for specific presentations. And if we have time at the end, we can take questions. During this presentation, if anyone has any questions, please feel free. It's welcomed in the chat. I won't be able to answer every question, but if I see something that relates to the topic that I'm discussing, then I will definitely take that question. So what is DLS? DLS is comprised of 5 different bureaus, and this presentation really touches on every single bureau. And so I think it's important to not say that this is all the Bureau of Local Assessment. This is a combination of information from municipal law, from Bureau of Accounts, from DARB or the data analytics, and also from the bureau formerly known as TAB, which is Financial Management Resource Bureau. So this presentation really comprises of data and narratives from all 5 of these bureaus. If you're new to municipal finance, each bureau provides a service. This is just a Reader's Digest from our webpage. I'm in the property valuation side of things at BLA, but we have financial management, legal and policy advice, analytics and resources, and technical assistance. So if you have any questions, these are how the bureaus are kind of set up, and they're designed to help cities and towns with municipal finance. Okay, so before we get into the actual classification hearing, there's actions required before you set the tax rate. So before the tax rate is set, what you'll have to do is determine the maximum amount that a levy can be under Prop 2.5. What I'm going to do now is just kind of take you into the gateway. And I'll be bouncing back from the actual presentation itself into gateway just to show you where things are on your system. So if you look under the tax rate, there's actually a levy limit. And what I'm going to do is pull up last year's levy limit, and we will pick this community. So feel free to use these numbers or borrow these numbers. If anyone asks what the levy limit is for the current year, past years, upcoming year, this is kind of the worksheet that I go to. It has any debt exclusions, it has any overrides if they were passed, and it also gives what the Prop 2.5 numbers are. But as you can see at the bottom, the maximum allowed levy is what's going to factor in after you have the levy limit. And for this community, they also had a debt exclusion. So getting back to, bear with me. Getting back to the decisions, in order to determine your Prop 2.5 levy limit, that's where you want to go. At that time, you're going to establish your final values. So you'll be working with the Bureau of Local Assessment to certify your or have your LA4 signed off. And what you're also looking for is just to have everything complete on the valuation side, so you know what tax rates you can pick. At that point, what we're going to get onto is deciding tax policy. So as far as tax policy, there's kind of 4 different categories or 4 different votes. One vote would be to have a single or multiple tax rate. One's going to be an open space discount if you have open space classified in your jurisdiction. The other option is a residential exemption and a small commercial exemption. As far as single or multiple tax rates, this is probably the hardest thing as far as assessors that we have to put together. There's a lot of facts and figures. And at this time, what I'm going to do is go into how do we come up with those different figures, and where do we get that information? So going back to Gateway, there's over on the left-hand side, and I apologize if this is small, but there's a under tax rate reports, there's an options table. And what the options table has is it pulls in your valuations from your LA4. It has the percentage of commercial, industrial, personal property that would be used to factor a rate, and it allows you to put in a levy for the upcoming year. This tool can also be used if there is an override coming up, a debt exclusion, or any financial planning purposes. You can use this options table to actually estimate what the increase would be based on expanding your levy or looking for an override or debt exclusion. As far as the shift range, everything starts at 1. And depending on what your community historically shifted to, it could be 1.5, 1.75. That would be calculated in Gateway for you. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call. But for this community, I'm going to pick 1.75. In shift increments for this, I'm going to pick 1. So what this does is it allows us to put in the levy that's coming up. It basically allows us to select a single tax rate, and it allows us to come up with a range of shifts from 1, which is considered not shifting. So that would be tax rates the same on both sides, all the way to 1.75, which at this point is the maximum allowed by law for this community. So the shift increments are down here. Some things to notice or to note over on the left-hand side, you can see. Let me just make this a little larger. There we go. Over on this side here, we actually have something new. We have the classification of residential exemptions, but we also have the senior means test. So if your community has this local option, Gateway does have the ability to estimate it and produce this report at the bottom with the senior means test. That is something that is new for this year. And if you have any questions, definitely let us know. But I know it was something that a lot of assessors and communities wanted. So I want to thank Darb, Gateway, and Jim Paquette for getting this all in. Under that section, you have the small commercial exemption. If your community votes on a small commercial exemption, you're able to factor that in to this also. So getting into the actual data or what this report produces, there's all sorts of different ways to look at this. You can also export this as an Excel file. Just bear with me. So when we're talking about actually mining data, if you have a system that you want to use, whether it's Excel, whether you're doing it by hand or using a dashboard system, what you can do based on all the options tables data entry is to create a tax rate based on the levy that you put in and based on your numbers from your LA4. So this starts all the way at a factor of 1, which would be up here. It also shows you all the different percentages, and it goes all the way down to a 1.75. I'll make this a little larger. So from here, you can take this information and these different tax rates, and you can actually create estimated increases or percent changes or whatever information based on your average single family, your average condominium, or your average commercial valuation, just using this rate that's generated from this form, and also using this rate, which is generated for the form for commercial, industrial, and personal property. You can put together some estimated numbers to help you at the classification hearing. Let me just look over. We got a couple questions. So as far as a senior means test, that's at this point, that is a local option. So as far as how does that work? I would ask your either city solicitor or ask your administration how they would put that forward. But I believe that's a local vote at on Beacon Hill for each community at this point. If you need more information, I believe the MAAO has some information, and we can help if you want to reach out to us also. We can kind of give you a sample community that has it. A lot of good information for senior means tests and residential exemptions are found on the communities that currently have them. If you look at Boston, for instance, they have a well-detailed explanation of how the residential exemption works in their community. And another community for senior means tests would be Wakefield. Wakefield has a very robust part of their website that explains how their senior means test works. So if you're looking for resources, those are resources that are available. And definitely feel free to look at other communities that have accepted this. So getting back to the PowerPoint. So once you have a single or a multiple rate, the next discount would be open space. So this would be class 2. If your community has any properties that are classified as class 2 properties, which are open space, you can have a local discount vote on it. So you would first have to look at your LA4 or look at your parcels to see if you have any parcels that qualify. And then you can go through it. I will provide resources for this type of vote and other votes later in the presentation. So if you have specific questions, I'll show you where to get those answers. The residential exemption is up to 35%. I believe there's less than 20 communities in Massachusetts that have this. I just mentioned that Boston has on their website how they administer the residential exemption. If you're looking at it or if you have questions, we have some resources which I'll show you, but it's also good to see how it works in other communities. So feel free to reach out to Boston and look at their website and resources. Small commercial exemption. This is, it depends on what your community has for parcels that qualify. Again, I'll provide some resources or some additional resources for this vote, but this is a vote that would be taken at the classification hearing. And I can show you some of the data or some of the narratives that you can look at to talk about this. I do understand that there are a lot of new assessors or new finance personnel. So my intent is to provide you with everything that you would ever want about classification hearings and the laws and local options. So I'll get onto that a little later in this presentation. As far as the presentation, this is something that is for me is very hard sometimes to understand. Classification hearing is one presentation, and even though we want to present to elected officials, we do have all of our residents, our taxpayers, our business community. There's a lot of different stakeholders that look at this meeting, and they estimate what their budgets in their homes will be as far as expense through taxation. But also businesses look at these types of arrangements too. So a shift in the tax rate could impact residents, businesses, and the elected officials are kind of who you're presenting, but it's important to realize that you might have to have different things in there for residents or the business community to explain kind of complex classification hearing terminology or scenarios. So it's always important to think about, if I was a resident, would I understand this presentation? If I was in the business community, how is this going to impact me? And when we go over the 3 different presentations, what I'll do is I'll show you exactly where we put in actual data and how we address concerns from residents and the business community. So this is kind of what I look at as a perfect presentation. So the change in the middle would be kind of tax policy, and the elected board that you're presenting to at the classification hearing ideally would be able to have tax policy or be able to implement change based on all 3 of these categories. So a strong narrative, why are we here? What are the votes that we have to do? How does this impact me? Those are all questions that people have, whether it's elected officials or someone in the audience. Having a strong narrative is very important. And then also data mining, making sure that you're grabbing the latest information, you're doing comparables of other communities. Is there too much data? Yes. There's a fine balance, and each community is going to be different. Is there a perfect presentation for every community in Massachusetts? Probably not. There's 351 different opinions on what the best solution is or the best presentation. So I would pick something that works in your community and build visuals. Visuals today are well received. People in this environment aren't reading lengthy explanations, but they'll watch videos, they'll look at graphs, and they'll also interact with some different dashboards or interactive software. Visuals to me are very important to get your point across, but also educate someone and bring them up to speed really fast using different colors and different types of charts and graphs. So as far as available data, what I wanted to do is kind of show all 3 of these different sources. For this presentation, a lot of this is compiled from these 3 sources. So on the left-hand side, you have the bulletins, guidelines, and opinions. So the Law Bureau spends a lot of time constantly writing and rewriting all sorts of guidelines and opinions for classification hearings and kind of how we're supposed to conduct classification hearings based off of Mass General laws. So at any point, you can look at IGRs, bulletins, or legal finance opinions, and hopefully you'll find something pertaining. If you don't, feel free to call the legal department. They do have an attorney on that is very knowledgeable each day, and you can ask very complex questions, and it's a great resource. As far as the municipal finance training, that's part of this program, and what we hope to do is not only have actual documents, but build a library of videos that are very intensive and very helpful for municipal finance, assessors, treasurer collectors, elected officials, CFOs, pretty much anyone in municipal finance. What we're trying to do is build a catalog of videos that can help you. It's funny, classification hearings, you might be the expert now, this is the time of year for it, but in June or maybe in January, you're not really thinking of that. So it's nice to maybe brush up on things, and DLS is really putting a lot of time and effort into building a library or a catalog of videos to help people not only this year, but years going forward, and also to educate anyone new to the profession. As far as data and mining, DARB is the bureau that's really in charge of compiling all the stats. When everyone puts their numbers into Gateway, when you're submitting all those numbers every year, DARB actually takes those numbers and presents them back to that community or other communities to use in financial planning, or maybe community comparisons, or maybe just looking at trends of forecasts. I would encourage everyone to spend a little time on DARB's site and look at all the different things. I'm finding new things every day for data sets. So this presentation is a lot of data, and for years I've been getting my information from DARB, and I encourage everyone to kind of explore that. So what we'll do after this presentation is we'll go through kind of 3 different actual classification hearing presentations with different samples of visualizations, different levels of stats and data. And hopefully this will help you prepare for a classification hearing or understand the different components of classification hearing using data from DLS. If anyone has any questions and is new to Zoom or after this, feel free to use the chat function. I see that people have entered things in, but you can find the chat by just clicking on that little chat blurb, whatever you want to call it, and submitting questions as they come up. I can answer things. Okay, so let's go in from here. So what we're looking at here is kind of what we can extract for a presentation. So one thing that I wanted to look at was different forms that I think are very important and why they're important. So in all the presentations that I've seen, it's nice to show how many single families, how many, what the parcel mix is, what the total valuation is for the community. For this presentation, this could be just a screen grab. Everyone has this form. By the time you get to the classification hearing, everything should be signed off. It also has the exempt parcel count and values. That's a question that's usually asked at classification hearings. So if anyone wants to just select this using a screen grab kind of software, this is how you would just insert it. You can just save it as a picture and put it in on a slide. I think it provides a lot of detail. Another form you can use is this, which is this is the LA4 comparison. So what it does is it compares last year's values to this year's values. And I think it's very informative to explain what's happening in the overall city or town, but also based on each land use code or section of land uses. For instance, apartments is all grouped together. This is valuable as far as, what are the assessments going up overall and per class. So this is something that I would use. I think we talked about the levy limit also. This is great to either take this information or just actually select or create a screenshot of just this top block. Or if you want to go down and select all of it. These are questions you get all the time. Someone might say, well, why can't we shift or why can't we levy anything higher than what you suggested? And you can basically say, based on all of our numbers from last year and this year, this is the max allowed levy under Prop 2.5. Anything more would have to be a debt exclusion, override, or something else. This is the max that we can get into. And as far as historic numbers, this is actually good for anyone that's new in assessing. If you're brand new to an office and you just wanted to see what happened, Gateway will allow you to go all the way back. So if you're putting together something and the information is not easily accessible, or it's not in any DARB information, you can actually go back year to year to pull that information. So feel free to look at things. Maybe you're looking at historic growth. Maybe you're looking at did the community always go up 2.5% every year? I think this is a very valuable tool to find out what's happened in the past. Okay, so as far as Gateway reports, I think we've covered most of it. I might come back to it later on, but what I'm going to do now is kind of provide just different information. So what I'm going to do is start actually at the landing page. So in our website, if you click on this municipal finance training and resources, and you go down to property taxes and Prop 2.5, what you're going to find is a lot of information pertaining to assessments, but also to the setting a tax rate. So if you scroll down to the bottom, what you'll find is all these different resources, whether it's videos, handbooks, or different sheets. All of these these components will really help you with setting a tax rate, but also understanding the process. So from time to time, you might have emails from residents or elected officials, and they're looking for a very detailed response. My suggestion is to really go into these resources, and you can borrow these. So just give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, so if someone's asking, how does a tax rate work? How does a recap sheet work? What actions are required? Feel free to use this and to cite this type of information. It's much easier to copy and paste some of these kind of complex Massachusetts specific tax policy questions. It's much easier to take a resource like this and to use this to answer the questions instead of coming up with your own answer. There's all sorts of different terminology in here. There's all sorts of just answers to almost all the questions that you would receive as an assessor or a municipal finance official. So if you have any questions, here's even the single or multiple rates. Why do we do that? You might have a new elected official that just doesn't understand why we're there. I would encourage reaching out to any elected official, with the cooperation of the administration before the classification hearing. Maybe this is something you can explain when they're just elected, or when it's a slow time before the classification hearing. Maybe you can provide these resources. But I've proven that if you spend a little time to educate the elected officials and everyone at that meeting, things go a lot smoother. So this is a resource that you can provide, and this pretty much answers almost any question you'll receive as a municipal finance person. But it's also content for your websites, it's content for your presentation, your classification hearing, and it's also good to read and reemphasize probably every year. Since we only do this once a year, it's nice to probably browse this each year just to make sure you're getting everything that you're supposed to. So from there, interactive videos are something that DLS is really putting a lot of time in. I don't know how hard it is sometimes to answer these questions at the front counter or through an email. But I will say that once most people see these videos, these complex questions are answered, and most people are very satisfied with the answer. So instead of trying to explain what a levy ceiling is at the front counter to someone that might be upset, you can send them a copy of the link to this video, or you can bring the video up at your front counter. If it's that important, you can also embed it on your website. If you get a lot of questions, chances are you want to answer those on your website. So DLS provides all these resources to cities and towns to borrow, to use, to broadcast. Please feel free to do that. The earlier part of this presentation, we talked about the Law Bureau and how do they provide classification, hearing data, and information. This is an IGR that actually deals with, pretty much what you're going to run into at classification hearings as far as different legal opinions or different requirements from Mass General laws. So feel free to really look at this information and feel free to use this too if it helps with your presentation. But these are all different resources that can be found on our website. This is actually a tool, and while I'm here, I just want to use this. This is something that I've used if you're looking at a debt exclusion or an override, or maybe you're a year out, maybe your finance director asked for what the impact of valuations will be next year. This is kind of a tool that you can use to see what the impacts of different adjustments to the levy is. Sometimes they're looking for tax forecasting. This is a tool that you can use to add to your levy, and then based on what your parcel makeup is, it can actually create different adjustments. So this is something that's on that section that you can start as early as the winter time, preparing for the upcoming year. Let's see. Just going to check to see if we have any questions. Okay, just bear with me 1 second. Yeah, as far as the average residential value, you can, let me see. Okay, residential exemptions. I'm going to get to that in a second. So once I go into the presentations, I'll address that. So I see that Pam explained that coming. Pam has knowledge working for the city of Everett. So I will go into a couple slides as far as the residential exemption. So just bear with me 1 second. Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do right now is actually show a historic, this is an actual presentation that was used in fiscal 2014. What you'll see is there's a common kind of flow as far as what data to take, what questions to ask, and we'll get into how to actually mine all this data. But I think it's important for us to just look at some of these things. As far as okay, so this is information when you're looking at the options table. That was one of the first things that we looked at. You really want to look at average single family. That's a metric that every community really uses to gauge what the impact is. Depending on the condos in your community, that might be the second highest land use code, and then average commercial. So using that options table, what you want to do is create what the value was last year, what the value is this year using the average value, and then you can look at different changes based on what you think the actual tax policy is. For this example, it was 1.47. But this is something that you probably should have somewhere in a presentation and you can get these numbers based on the option table. So by calculating, by using the options table and the rate that's on there, you can back into what the estimated tax bill was for this upcoming year. So you would have to go in and pick a residential tax shift factor, and this one was 1.47 for a shift. And this is what would happen if that city or town picked that. Down below here, you can see this community had from 1 all the way to 1.5. So using that options table, there would have been 50 different shifts. I wouldn't want to provide that in one slide. I think the font would be about an 8 font, and it's just too much data. So for this presentation, based on historical shifts, based on conversations and maybe previous meetings, we outlined what exactly the shift would look like based on all the different historical data. You could go all the way down to 1.0, you could go all the way up to 1.5, but this is for this presentation, this is enough to show. You should provide all the other shifts just in case someone wants to look at them, but most likely it would happen between these. So having huge data sets, having every possible option, sometimes is just a little too much data. So just because the options table spits it out and you can provide that, you might not want to put that in a PowerPoint because it's really not, it's too much information to present. This is something that is very useful in this community. Sometimes the commercial, industrial, and personal property class is getting smaller each year. So based on the shift, all these numbers are available on the site, and I can show you where those are. But it's important to show what would happen with no shift. So you're looking at the 19.4. And then with the 1.47, it actually jumps up to that CIP pays for 28% or 28.6% of the budget based on the shift. So kind of a before and after. DARB has these numbers, I believe, all the way back to 2004 or 2005. So you can look at your community and other communities. This is just a sample of different comparisons. A lot of presentations use communities that are directly around them. This is an approach that was used in this community. So what percentage of parcels is commercial, what is commercial, industrial, and personal property, and what is residential? This information is also available from DARB, and this is all the comparable communities as far as different tax rates. And this is what it would look like in a presentation. Same thing with the shift amount and historical levy. This number is also available. So let's go into the actual DARB numbers and how would you get this information? So if you go down to, this is the DARB landing page website, and under reports relating to property tax and tax data, this is going to be pretty much where all of our data for the classification hearing will be. All these reports are exportable in Excel, and this is all the data that we use for all of those reports or those graphics that I showed. So as far as tax rates, it's very easy to get that information. And let me just make this a little larger. So DARB has information on 351 different communities. You can select all, or you can select different ones depending on what kind of presentation you're putting together. So I'll select the different 4 different ones. Here, we'll add one more. As far as the years, it defaults to these years, but you can also, if you really want to go back, you can submit all the years. So once you hit the submit button, you're going to see all the different tax rates per community per year. You can also sort these different columns and look at all the historic data. But I'd say the most common thing is to export it out to Excel. From here, it comes over all structured as a database where you can use different things. You can create pivot tables, you can create graphs, you can use all this information to build different slides for your classification hearing. So this one would be historic information based on a selection of communities for tax rate information going all the way back to 2003. Okay, so as far as new growth, this is something that sometimes communities are looking at, what happened in the past. Sometimes elected officials or finance directors might say, what's growth going to come in at this year? How do I get that information? And if you're new to the community, you really can spend some time on here and have an educated kind of answer to that based on the history. So this community will look at Abington first, but here's all the consistent numbers, total growth applied to levy limit. So you can look at it here, or you can export the table. And when you export the table, you can do a 5-year kind of review. You can do a 10-year review. You can do a review for a certain regional area if you're looking at anything in the region, but all of that information is here, and it's helpful to show if your growth is going way up or way down. You can have a basic comparison. Okay, so as far as excess levy, so one of the slides that I had was the levy history. So if you're looking at the levy history for your community, and I'll just pick Abington also. So what you can do, I'll export this to Excel. So if you don't have this information in your office, you can go to DARB's website and you can grab the total assessed value, or you can look at override capacity. You can look at all these different kind of levy figures. So you can see where the levy's gone from 2008 to 22. You can look at what the capacity was. It looks like based on these numbers, they shifted right up to Prop 2.5 numbers. So this helps as far as building a presentation. And if it's your first day on the job in Abington, here's all your information. You can see exactly what tax policy or what's happened in previous years. Okay, so is there a way to select by county? Yes, there is. So some of these data sets do have county information in them. Some of them don't. In order to join that, you would look at combining 2 data sets in Excel. I'm not going to go into the technical side of that, but if you do have an IT person or someone in your community, they can join different data sets based on this DOR code. So the DOR code is consistent with all the data sets per community. You can use that to join multiple things. That's a whole other hour, a whole nother day. But if that's something that people are looking at, maybe we could provide some explanation on how to do that. But I would believe in your city and town hall, there is someone that could easily help you do that. Let's say. Okay, so let me just go back for a second. So I'm not going to go through every single data set, but I can tell you there's everything that you would ever want to know as far as numbers. One of the numbers that we are working on that was a question is the average tax bill for communities that have residential exemptions. We have put a placeholder in Gateway for that. This is the first year that we're doing it. We don't have a complete data set on that, but hopefully in the near future, I can inform everyone that we do have a data set on it. But there was, thanks to Darb and Kirsten, there was an improvement in Gateway for those communities so that we can use them in comparison with communities that do not have residential exemptions. Assess values. I think this is, in this market, even residents, business residents, and elected officials sometimes are amazed at how values are increasing every year, or how they're increasing now than previous years. So with this data set here, you can really go back quite a ways. And I'm just going to select one community. So if you're looking at different CIP totals or what's happened over the years, DLS provides a data set that goes all the way back to 2002 by class, all the way up to current. So as your community sets values, this information comes over. So depending on when your classification hearing is, I would encourage you to revisit the site and really look at these different things. But this is an example of all different years and where is residential properties gone? What is the split for residential and CIP? All that information's here, and this is great for website content, but also classification hearing presentations. There is different chart options also, so definitely spend some time on that. There's state totals. If you're looking at that, based on my selection, I probably pick something, but definitely feel free to look around at those different things. I'm trying to think what other questions we would have. Here we go. So again, if you're new to a community, if you're just looking at surrounding communities, here's some information that is extremely valuable at this time of year. So say we're looking at 5-year comparison for these different communities. Okay, submit. Okay, so from here, you can see all these communities, what their max allowed shift is, what factor they selected, so their residential factor. You can look at the CIP shift numbers. All these different kind of facts and figures will help you determine how your community kind of fits in with all the communities around you. And it informs all the elected officials of what tax policies are going around in surrounding communities. So you can do this statewide, you can do it region, or just communities that actually abut your community. So this is a great resource. And if you want to go all the way back, this data set goes to 2003. And feel free to go as far back as you need to. But again, if you're a new assessor, if you're new to municipal finance, you can see historically what that community has voted compared to another community that you might have worked in, or how they stack up with communities around them. And again, this is all exportable to Excel. So all this information comes right over, and you can build graphs, charts, and visualizations very easy. Let's see. So there's some other things here. Here's a municipal levy, different sheets. So you can look at anything. There's some public facing kind of documents. If you go over to the home section, and you actually look down here, these are all different things that the general public has access to. So they can see, for the most part, different reports. After your recap is done, they're able to go in and look at different things. So it's nice to know that is publicly accessible. Maybe you want to grab it and pull it over for website content. But all this information is available without logging into a specific user account. Okay, so we did have a question about residential exemptions, and When I was an assessor, that was something that was very kind of hard to explain in a 30-second soundbite. So what I put together for this presentation was a few different slides. So just a basic slide of what is a residential exemption, maybe some different extremes as far as this community. I don't believe the 35% was allowed by law at this time. I believe it was 20%, but you can have a residential exemption up to 35% now. But what I wanted to do was provide some information at the classification hearing about residential exemptions. All this information I got from DLS at the time. The only thing I did have to kind of figure was what percentage of the houses were owner occupied. A very easy way to do that, or not so easy, but a way to do that is to combine the voter registration with CAMA and to see if those are owner occupied. And you do have to make some guesses, but you can come up with, as a community, 90%, 80%. You won't really know until you actually send out the notices and kind of go through it. But for this exercise, 92% owner occupied was picked. So how does the residential exemption work? So the residential value is the parcels are divided by the residential value, and you basically come up with an average residential value. This is a very simplistic way of looking at it, and I'm sure Pam and other assessors have a more complex way of forecasting this. But I think it's a very easy slide to put together and to show the impacts of 5%, 10%, 15%, and 20% for the average res value. To go on further, what I did was put together kind of what the single tax rate or the shifted tax rate would be without any residential exemption, and then what the residential exemption loaded tax rate would look for 5%, 10%, 15%, and 20%. So depending on where your valuation comes in, there's a break-even point where you don't receive a benefit from a residential exemption. And then there's also an increase in value for the high end. If you have a single family or a property that's higher than that, you would see an increase based on a residential exemption. Based on the 29% of increases, you can use your data from the LA4 or from a CAMA extract to kind of see exactly how this would take place, but the impact mostly was 71% in single family households. So that's an example of some slides to put together. If your community is looking at residential exemptions or any of those kind of tax policy things, I encourage to start the process as early as possible, and then work with your financial team to put together some of these slides or graphics. Let's see. So what I'm going to do now is kind of show a presentation that I believe is using the latest technology. All the data that was extracted or mined is the same, whether it's the 2014, 2016, or this presentation. All of it is that DARB data that I showed in those Excel exports. But this is a presentation using kind of a dashboard software. So this is available to some communities, and I would encourage conversation with your IT department or any resources that you have at your city and town. Maybe you have the software. So first I want to start with kind of book holders. So at the beginning of the book, book holder, the first one, what you want to do is inform the city council, board of selectmen, why they're there, what votes need to be taken, and kind of just a basic explanation of a classification hearing. On the end bookmark, you have to imagine that some of these people that are attending these meetings, you might have new officials, new residents, you might have people that are not familiar with municipal finance terms. This is a good thing to put at the end of any presentation. So all these terms, all these definitions are available through the documentation or the links that I showed you right on our website. If you have trouble finding any of this, definitely feel free to reach out. So using and mining data, this is a dashboard just to kind of show the history for this community. So looking at the 4 different blocks, one is the total levy by fiscal year. So we can look at this information was just taken from that Excel file. So if anyone generates that Excel file, you can build a graph like this to find out exactly where the levy has gone from year to year. So at any point you can see here, and this is what debt exclusion and override actually looks like on the levy. You can see Prop 2.5 kind of moving along. And then here from 19 to 20, you can see a sharp increase. Over on the right-hand side at the top is residential and commercial tax rates per year. So using DARB data, using all of the information provided on our website, you can put together what the history of residential and commercial tax rates are. As we know, based on Prop 2.5 regulations, we have to kind of back into a tax rate. So as the values go high, the tax rate will actually go down. As the values go down, the tax rate goes high to back into increased revenues each year or increased levies. So you'll see on these slides kind of the tax rate going up and down, and in Melrose, a lot of the values have been steadily going up. Over on the bottom left-hand side, you can see this is the average single-family value by year. The bottom line is actually the state average, which is a number that we provide. And then on top on the red is a Melrose or a community-specific number. So you can see where the kind of the values are all along with the state. And then over the last 5 years, you can see an increase. And then the last block over on the right-hand side is the single-family tax bill. And again, at the bottom is the state average. Kind of, you can see the lines are parallel. And then this last year, the 2019 to 20, there was an increase from an override. So for the most part, the increases from Prop 2.5 kind of going along with the state. And this information can all be gathered from DARB and from those websites that I showed you. This is a great thing to put on a slide, to have the last 10 years of shifts. Maybe you have a new elected board and they're just looking at historically, what shift did we pick? I have 75 different options. What did we pick last year? What did we pick the year before? So again, this information is all available from DARB. This is a relatively new approach to community comparisons. So sometimes the communities around us are like us, and sometimes they're drastically different. So using the data set that was provided from DARB, you can go in and actually get the municipality, an average single family amount or assessed value, single tax bill amount, and then where they rank. Using some information from MassGIS, you can actually put together a slide based on the whole state. So if you're looking for all the information, the whole data set, this is for the whole Commonwealth. And for this presentation, they were just looking 10 miles from their jurisdiction, but all that data is here and it can be displayed in a pretty easy way. So using some new kind of technology, you can present location data, work with your community to see what resources you have, but this did not take too long to develop. And I encourage everyone to work up to your capabilities. Don't feel you have to go to this level, but the information is there if you want to design something like this. So going to the next slide, here's an example of just different components that I've taken right from Gateway. There was a time where I would actually physically transpose these numbers. And why do that? If you screenshot it and get it to the right size, this is more than adequate for a classification hearing. So definitely feel free to borrow any of this information, whether it's a screen grab or whether you create your own facts or figures. And then down here, this is always something nice to put in. And it's just the basic calculation. If you had a single tax rate, this is all the information that you need to come up with that 1133. Okay, so options table. I think at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about, depending on your available shift, you could have, if you're at 1.5, you could have 50 different options to shift. Or if you're at 1.75, you could have 75 different options to pick. And how do you present that at a meeting? How do you take that data from the options table and put it into a slide or into something interactive like this? So for this community, based on history, most likely the facts or figures from DARB, this is where they were going to pick for a CIP. They could pick one, they could pick anything off of here, but based off the historical numbers, this is the range that most likely they would pick from. So in order to create this, you have to have your single family average value and then the average commercial value. Those two numbers are going to allow you to put in what the average bill is, and then the increase, and then percentage increase. So the options table extract will give you the CIP, the MRF, and then the tax rate. These numbers in the middle are actually using this $657,000 average single family amount. So you can go in and look at all these different things and calculate what the increases are. And then on the other side, you can look at the increases for commercial properties. So once you arrive at what your average commercial tax assessment is, you can apply these different facts or figures using this tax rate from the options table to create your increase, your average tax bill, and kind of your selection. Where do you think your community would select from? Now, providing the whole shift list is important. So this basically hides it, but you could also find out all the different options. So you might have someone say, you showed me everything from 1.6 all the way to 1.75, but what happens at 1.2? What happens at 1? Using some of this dashboard software, you can go year to year to see exactly what the shift and what the increase is. So this community had a lot of residential properties and not a lot of commercial industrial properties. So the break-even point, or where they would usually go, started at 1.6, 1.61. Anything less than that, there was a decrease in the average tax bill for commercial. And that's just based on the parcel makeup of this community. So as you go down, the first decrease is at $71 for the average commercial, all the way up to, if they went with a no shift on the tax rate, it would be a $5,634 decrease for selecting an equalized or a factor of 1, while increasing the average tax bill for a single family house, $429. On the other extreme, if you shifted all the way to the max, you would actually increase the average commercial tax bill by $1,317, and the increase for residential would be down to $140. So there's all different scenarios. In my opinion, there is a thing as too much data. So it's nice to be able to kind of select where you think a community is going to be, but also provide the whole data set just in case someone wants to look at all the different scenarios. So with this shift, if you went all the way out, you're talking 76 different shift scenarios. The minimum would be 1, the max would be 1.75. That's a lot to look at compared to, historically where they voted from here to here. So if you don't have the interactive tool and you're trying to maximize your PowerPoint presentation, you might want to limit the shift options for your visualization. Okay, so the next slide, this is just different metrics on how things work. Again, I select the selection here was 1.6 to 1.7. Here's all your different options. But over on the right-hand side, what it's going to do is show you what the max bill is, the minimum bill, the median bill, the change amount for the minimum, the max, and then percent changes. So that's going to all be based on this selection. So if you go all the way out, this is going to show no matter what, no matter legally based on Prop 2.5, the most that you'll get for a tax bill for single families based on these figures is 7,000. Let's see. Yep. The minimum bill, I'm sorry. So you'll see all the minimum and maximum change based on this. So you'll have a median, the minimum change, maximum change, and all that's going to change based on this. So 76 kind of different options. So this is an example of just a data set where there's just so much data. Again, shrink this down. One important thing to notice on this is the final tax rates can change slightly when submitting to DOR. I think that this is a note that you should have on any classification hearing, because even if it's a penny over your levy limit, you really want to make sure that the newspaper and elected officials don't get so set on an actual dollar amount down to the penny. It could go up or down depending on how all the numbers work. So that allows you to really have that out or that notice in there. If someone publishes, taxes are going to go up this exact amount and they go up slightly less or slightly more. It's just a good thing to have in there. So with that, I'm going to look at some of the questions. I can open it up to questions at this point. I know it's a lot of information, but I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has at this point. Okay. Let me just look through. Okay, so I think the question as far as reporting of communities that have residential exemptions, there's an opportunity to get that data this year. So we'll know probably next year as far as if those communities are populating that. So that has been a change in Gateway at this point. So any residential exemption communities do have the option of manually putting in an amount that we can use for average single family tax bill. So hopefully that will come this year. LA5, we kind of went over the senior means test. That should be in there. I know in previous years, the option to do that was kind of combined with the residential exemption. This year, you'll be able to break that out separately. If you have any questions on that function, please reach out. Growth estimate. Perfect. That's so if you look at the numbers, or if you look at, let me just go, bear with me. Okay. Okay, so can everyone see that screen? All right, let's see. So as far as growth estimates, so it's going to be under reports for tax data and statistics, and then right down. I think I went too fast here. Here we go. So this is where the data for new growth can be found. If you're looking at it, You can look at the last 4 or 5 years. You can look at a 10-year trend, but this is where you'd find the data for growth. That last presentation was done in Power BI, which is a Microsoft dashboard software. There's all sorts of options for that. There's Tableau. There's a lot of different software packages that can kind of show that. So I would work with your city or town to find out what they have for options. But Melrose used Power BI to present those numbers. Who maintains the Power BI info? The assessing department does that, but all the data is actually taken from DARB. All that information is taken from its raw format and presented here. So updates to the data happen as fiscal years go forward. So every year we'll grab the latest data, but the assessing department maintains a library of DLS data used in that community. All right. Does anyone else have any questions? I know this was a lot, so if you have any specific questions, definitely feel free to reach out. We did receive some questions when everyone was signing up, and I believe I addressed all those questions. Selections by county. One more question. So let's go in. And I believe, bear with me 1 second. All right, one of these data sets has county in it, and let's see if any, community comparison report has it. So what you'll have to do is just kind of join it. So I would work with the IT staff, but there's lots of ways to join different data sets. If you do have something, Karen, I can send you the county one. And if anyone needs the county one after this presentation, I can look at it. But it's really not that hard to join these different data sets. So thank you. I really enjoyed this, and I hope everyone got something out of this. And if you have any suggestions for future kind of presentations, feel free to reach out. And I hope everyone has a excellent classification hearing season and tax rate season. So thank you, and it was nice to hear from everyone.